Welcome in, pugilistic podcast pioneers, to Babbling with BALBOA, our Rocky and Creed series retrospective. We are back for another round. And before we get started, I'd like to tell you, my name is Jared.
My name's Matt.
Mike.
And today on the show, guys, we have a special guest coming to us as the host of the SideTrack'd podcast, a great podcast that you should all be subscribed to, Mr. Deke Antrim. Deke, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, welcome to the show, man.
No, man, it's I've been a long time listener. It's an honor to talk to you guys. I'm my heart's on fire, and I have a strong desire to talk about Rocky IV, the director's cut, Rocky versus Drago, the ultimate director's cut, cultural learnings for America for Make Benefit Glorious National Kazakhstan. Yeah, whatever that long title is. So.
Wow,
that is okay. So
I would have actually liked to have seen that scroll across the screen.
Man, okay. So as Deke has just said, what could bring us back to Mighty Mick's gym again?
Man.
I mean, we finished up all 8 movies, right? What is it?
Well, we talked about it. We knew that it was coming. It had been rumored a long time. Yes. It was going to happen. It was not going to happen. And then it happened. Stallone got his act together. He pulled up all the clips off the floor and he put together maybe a masterpiece.
He has all that free time from not being in Creed 3.
Well, he was okay. Before we get started, you guys need to watch the documentary that's on YouTube. It's actually longer than the director's cut of Rocky.
I should have watched that. I didn't watch that.
That's good. Very good.
It's free of charge. It's on YouTube for everyone to watch, and it's quite interesting.
See, now I feel like I'm going to be short.
No, we're not talking about
I'm
documentary.
Happy. I just watched it last night for the first time.
But
I didn't get a chance to go to the theater to watch it.
I want to hear your guys' opinions without even knowing where Stallone was coming from. I'm actually super excited to talk about this movie with you guys. Just listening to your Babbling with BABBLING series, I'm very interested to see what you guys think of this new cut.
Well, I figure
I hated it.
Okay. Okay. So
joking, that's a lie.
This is the Dune of the Rocky series.
Yes.
We're gonna start at the beginning and just go through it, talk about the changes, and I figure at the end we can just wrap up with what our overall thoughts are. But me and Deke had a shared experience with this movie, and we have to talk about this at the beginning because me and Deke and our friend Mark, we saw this in a theater on the one night only November 11th screening that Fathom Events did. And we saw it at the Park Place Regal Cinemas, which
well, you really want the hate mail to go to a specific address.
Yes. And Matt and Mike, that's where we saw Solo together. So I don't even know where
is that where the mall used to be?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I think I saw Rocky Balboa.
If you don't know where to begin, I do. So
okay. So Deke, why don't you tell them how our movie experience began that night?
I mean, you got to keep in mind, you got to understand, and sorry, just give you a little backstory on what this movie means to me. I saw this movie when I was 10 years old in the theater. So, to come around 36 years later and be able to see it again in the theater in a new vision was huge to me. And I'm sure for you guys, for you too, Jared, but you got to understand, anybody who goes to see a movie that's 36 years old, they're in that theater because they're a fan of that movie. So everybody in there was there to be entertained and get the full benefit of what we paid for. So for that screening, with the package that you had paid for, you get an interview before the show. I think he showed up. You told me he was at the Creed restaurant, right?
No,
doing a little PR.
He was before, but
Okay.
He did the actual Q&A at the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
Right.
Now, was this live? Or
Yes,
it was live.
It was a live stream.
It was
I
done
didn't know
by
that.
and it was done by Ben Mankiewicz, who his grandfather wrote Citizen Kane. He's one of the most respected film interviewers in history. I've been dying to see this interview once I heard that he was the one doing the interview, and we're all sitting there. Mark went to go get a beer, which took him 45 minutes, but we're sitting there, and all of a sudden the interview starts up, and we're like, licking our chops, like, here it goes, and all of a sudden there's no audio. and it just keeps going and going.
Oh,
And so,
really?
you know,
Okay.
go ahead.
5 minutes, no audio. I
Yeah.
get up and go talk to someone and was like, hey, do you know in the Rocky Theater there's no audio for this
Oh,
live stream?
no.
Mhm.
And they're like, okay, well, we're on it. And I couldn't find Mark. I didn't see Mark in the lobby. I was like, I don't know where he is.
Right. Right.
So I came back and sat down with Deke, and it continues on, no audio. But
And
then,
mind you, and I didn't get to tell you, you know, and I apologize for not saying this. When Mankiewicz is out there, it's this. I mean, they did it to the nine. They had this whole set at the museum, and it was like a big screening, and they had this whole like Rocky display behind them. It was like at least 30 feet tall, nicely lit. I mean, it was a good, well produced. It wasn't like, you know, Sly on a cell phone. It was like a really well produced interview that you were paying for.
Mhm.
So we're going 5 minutes without the audio. Finally, after, and of course, the crowd's getting restless because there are all these people who have been dying to see this movie for 35 years, and they're not hearing this interview. And so everyone's like booing and hissing, and it's really pissing off the crowd. So then finally the interview kicks in, and I'd say we get to about like the 15-minute mark. And so the interview's doing really well.
Real quick,
And
was
go
this
ahead.
specific to your theater, or was this like to all the theaters?
I'm going to
Well-
say our theater because of the ending of this story. I'm going to
Okay.
say that
Sorry,
the
okay.
technical.
and,
no,
and,
that's all right.
and it is a live stream, so they
Right.
cannot just rewind it and
Right.
start it from the
Yeah.
beginning.
The interview.
we're missing this.
Yeah, if we don't get the interview, we don't get it. So all of a sudden, about 15 minutes into it, you know, when you go see a movie and it's shot, and we can talk about this later, in a aspect ratio of 2:3:9, the most beautiful pre-show part of a movie like that, the presentation, is when the curtains start to open and open and open, and you're like, okay, I'm getting ready to see a scope shot movie. So the curtains start opening, and I thought they were just kind of doing that because just to kind of get ready for the movie. But all of a sudden, the MGM logo starts coming up. Wait, it gets worse. We're not done. The MGM logo.
Achy
comes
breaky
up.
heart started.
No.
No, I've heard that story. So we're
Right.
still hearing Ben Mankiewicz asking Sly questions while we're seeing what turns out to be brand new footage from Rocky 3, which is now part of the movie. So now the movie has started. And if you thought the crowd wasn't upset before this happened, let me assure you, once the friggin' movie that they've been waiting 35 years to see has started and now does not have any audio, I can assure you, besides the idiot down in the front row who was making motorcycle sound effects and, you know, like egging on the audience, like, bah, 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 and like
Oh,
everyone's
man.
laughing, and you're like, oh my God, please, I'm not with this guy. But after all the sound effects, I'd say another 5 minutes went
Well,
by before the audio
but-
started working again.
Well, the audio then cuts out completely.
Right.
Like we lose the interview audio, and then it's just the movie playing with no audio.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, when Mark walks in, I remember this. He walked in when Rocky is throwing his helmet at the statue,
yeah.
and he heard Sly voicing over this shot. And he said to me later, he's like, I thought this was some weird thing Sly was doing for the director's cut. He was adding voiceover to this shot. And I was like, oh man, no, that's not it. So then Mark sits down, and then he gets back up because we're sitting in a theater with no sound, and we're already deep into the second fight with Clubber Lang at this point. And so he goes out and he says, hey, there's no audio on Rocky. What? He goes, if you start it over, you need to start it over with audio, and you need to start it over because it's all messed up. So he comes back in and he tells us what he did. And then I would say a good half hour after the movie was supposed to start, it started correctly.
Yeah. So I mean, by the end of the night, no harm, no foul, but still, oh my God, what a start. It was
Yeah, that's
ridiculous.
rough. That's
Yeah.
And I requested refunds by email and was told to contact their corporate office.
That's
Nice.
regal.com.
Okay, so-
com.
Anytime you go and see a movie like this, especially when you have like an anniversary edition or something that comes back in the theater, you know, fandom comes out in droves. And usually, especially in sci-fi movies, you get a lot of specimens that show up to the theater. Any good specimens, any good Rockies, any Apollo?
Oh, they were all pretty normal looking.
Pretty normal. I will say, and just to kind of round out the complete night, you know, Jared, I don't remember, but there was a guy about 3 rows in front of us, had to be the one guy who does it. But I'd say like every 15 minutes, he kept putting his phone above his head and recording a good 30 seconds each 15 minutes. And I'm thinking, hey, dude, this is being released tomorrow on digital. What is the friggin' point of recording these little like Instagram word, like short little snippets? I was like getting pretty furious about it. There's nothing worse for me than someone who raises up basically a flashlight above their head, you know, and does like the John Cusack thing and recording the movie.
Yes.
It was super annoying. And we can talk about this later. I have to tell you, in hindsight, Jared, I didn't bring this up at the screening, and it wasn't until the next day when I purchased it in 4K with HDR. But I got to tell you, the Fathom colors were completely off. It is completely different at home on a properly calibrated screen. Just putting that out there. We can
Okay.
talk about that later. But in hindsight, those colors were super washed out. So,
Wow.
but that being said, I got to tell you, it was a fantastic experience to see it up on the big screen. And I did lean over to Jared at one point and I said, hey, I got to tell you, at home, I like the normal 1:8:5 aspect ratio, but man, in the theater, watching Rocky IV up on the huge screen and a 2:3:9 aspect ratio, that was something pretty special. I have to admit, coming back 35 years later, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it looked great. And
Yeah, I have to say I had a similar experience when they released Jaws in the theater a few years ago. And it was really cool watching it in the theater like that. Just that.
Yeah.
well, you know, when the movie first started, so it, as Deke eloquently explained, our initial impressions were rather tainted. But when the movie starts, I mean, it starts kind of different than any other Rocky movie ever.
Well, hold on. You said at the end of the Q&A, it made you think it was geared specifically towards your theater. Was there something more to that, or does that come later?
Oh, so I apologize. The fact that they were able to rewind the movie. Sorry, Mike, you're right. I apologize. But we were kind of freaking out because I thought maybe because this was a Fathom event, everything was going to be streaming to all the theaters throughout the country. So I was freaking out when we weren't getting audio on the live interview. And then it went right into the movie because I was starting to freak out thinking Fathom is messing this up. And they're starting the movie 15 minutes early, messing up the audio. And by the time Mark gets back into a seat, we're not going to get the movie correctly. We're going to be missing like the first half hour. The fact that the theater was able to rewind it means that the interview was still live via Fathom. And then they must have sent copies or something or whatever. They were able to, the movie theater was able to rewind the movie individually. Yeah. So that's what I meant.
But we did miss that interview because
yes, the interview was completely gone, which sucks because we paid for it.
But so anyways, so when the movie started, what struck me initially was, holy crap, there's Mr. T on a giant screen. And I've never seen Rocky III in a theater. And for me, initially, that was like the cool part. Like, I've never seen any of this footage in a theater before. I hadn't seen Rocky IV in a theater before, but just seeing Rocky III. And there's a lot of deleted stuff from Rocky III in this first 7 minutes. I mean, slightly alternate takes. And that's what surprised me is, and it was 7 minutes because I kind of timed it when I watched it back.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. The original opening is 3 minutes. It went all the way to 7. That's 4 extra minutes of opening sequence.
And, you know, we saw, of course, we see Rocky in his initial round or his initial fight with Clubber get knocked out. We see some alternate stuff as he's driving his motorcycle to Mighty Mix. And this is where I remember getting really pissed because I was like, man, I've never seen this footage before and I don't want to see it like this. But I was surprised by the very deliberate pace of the Rocky III recap. I mean, so what did you guys think about it?
Well, I guess it's been last time I watched those movies when we did our podcast. So I don't remember that being new footage from Rocky III. I just remember it being Rocky III. So that I didn't, I mean, obviously I knew it was cut a little different, but also, you know, I didn't watch Rocky IV right before I watched this because I didn't want that hanging over me while I was watching the new one, you know, sit there comparing the two. And I'm really glad I did that. So, but, you know, I watching it at first I was confused why they were showing so much of Rocky 3,
Yes.
because the theatrical opens with the fight, and then it goes into the little sparring thing
To the secret
between
fight
them.
that they have.
Yeah, and they excise that completely.
Mhm.
So like I said, it wasn't until the movie was over that I was kind of understood more why they did that, because I felt like at first I was like, is he trying to make this a contained movie? Like it just exists by itself. And so you need that Rocky 3 stuff so you kind of understand more. But I don't think that's what he was doing.
Yeah, when I saw it, it's funny because a lot like Deke, or actually, I think all of us for Rocky 4 when I was a kid was like, that was my favorite Rocky movie, because it's like it was the most Hollywood. I was a kid, I didn't see it in the theater, but it played a lot. I remember like Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 playing a whole bunch. I don't remember seeing Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 a lot when I was a kid, but I saw a ton of Rocky 3 and even more Rocky 4, and I loved Rocky 4. And that, even though it's like we talked about it on other Babbling with Balboa, is that once you get to like Rocky 3 and Rocky 4, the Rocky movies shift into a very Hollywood-esque kind of Rocky versus a much more like writing grounded kind of movie. It becomes much more Hollywood-esque. And Rocky 4 is the best epitome of that because it's so big and it's such a blockbuster-esque kind of thing. So, but I was still excited when I saw it. And to start this movie, I was like, first off, I didn't get to see it in the theater like Deacon Jared did, but I was excited to watch it when I finally got a chance to sit down. The pacing, as you said, is deliberate, and it's not. I don't want to like say and jump to the end that this isn't as watchable as the original, because it certainly is watchable in its own regard. But the pace in this movie from start to finish is much different as it's cut together as the original. And it's definitely not as fast. It's definitely not as exciting. It's definitely not as like, as Hollywood, it doesn't stop kind of thing. And that 7 minutes in the beginning with the Rocky 3 footage is a perfect example. It stalls the movie immediately, and you watch and you're kind of like learning and thinking about it a lot more than you did watching it in the original cut, and it changes the entire thing. The entire Rocky-esque open changes. That whole fast-paced open, that whole like great montage to get you into the movie is done. This is like a Rocky movie. This is like what you would see more with the Rocky Balboa and the Creed movies, how it's shot than how it used to be.
See, that's what after watching the movie, that's my takeaway, is he was trying to do a less of the original Hollywood movie and more of the roots of the franchise.
I'll get into more thoughts later on as we get further.
What did you think about the opening 7 minutes?
So before I even talk about that, I do have to set the precedence that, going into this movie, I love Rocky 4 so much that I think I kind of went in a little apprehensive to be a little open to a new cut. Mm-hmm. And so I have to tell you, my first screening, I had some good things to say after the movie with you, Jared, if I remember correctly, but I had some reservations. And I have to say that when you're so familiar, something so intimate that you've watched so many times, anything that's changed, even the slightest little angle or different music or any kind of different sees to the new cut, was very jarring to me. So especially starting off with the Rocky 3 and extending it from 3 to 7 minutes, I have to tell you, for me, I was really kind of thrown off. And I remember thinking, well, I really enjoyed the sparring match they have. There's a couple of things that went in. I think a lot of people just look at the original cut of the sparring match as just, them having fun. But if you actually look at it, for me, it always set up a great spiritual friendship between those two. And besides all the glitz and glamour, they go to basically an underground boxing match. They cut all the audiences out of the situation, and they just have a friendly, let's get out what we need to get out type of fight. And it ends on a freeze frame that was very looming to me. It says that Creed, never takes anything serious. He's dancing around the boxing ring, and he's joking around. He's not taking things serious, which is an echoing theme throughout this new cut and the old cut. But, it was very jarring. And I missed, originally when I saw it, I missed the sparring match between them, because I really like that freeze frame with them both going at the punch together, because that was kind of a looming shot for me. That kind of spelled danger for me. And so I really missed that original cut of the film. But then I have to tell you, and this is going to be what I'm going to be saying throughout the rest of the podcast, but I have watched the movie a couple of times since, and it has grown on me so much that I am actually absolutely in love with this new cut, and I have a lot of great things to say about this new cut, and I absolutely love the new opening a lot more than the original cut. And this is coming from somebody who has been obsessed with this movie for 35 years. And I do have to tell you, for me, the new cut is the version I will probably only watch for the rest of my life. And that's how serious I am about this new cut. I find it to be an extremely mature edit, and it's I think Rocky IV, I was so in love with it because it was an encapsulation of what Stallone was at the time. You know, Rambo 2 would come out the same year. He was at the height of his fame, and that movie is straight up rock and roll. It's MTV, it's rock and roll. This new version is where Stallone is at now in his career, and I'm kind of with him now. I'm much older, and I appreciate the nuances that he put into this new cut. Sorry to ramble, but I do have to tell you, I love the new open, and I'm going to be saying a lot of that going forward throughout this podcast, just to preempt you.
I'm going to pile on because I had the same thing about the missing the shot between the two of them. Because like I said, originally I was like, well, why did he cut that out? But then like I was thinking about later, I'm like, well, that scene didn't go away. It's still in 3. So you didn't really lose it. It's just not in 4 anymore. So it's not like, if you were to do like a watch through with all of them and do this one instead of theatrical, you're still going to have that. And I think at first I felt like it was kind of like, well, why'd you cut that out? You know, that was silly. But then I was like, well, wait, it didn't go away. So
can I ask you, Mike, how many times have you seen the new cut?
I've only watched it once.
I have to tell you, try it one more time and see how it lands on you again.
No,
I'd be very interested to see, because in this new version, the big running theme throughout this new version is the Warrior's Code. That's the thing that happens. And now when you have Creed starting off, building him back up, and he says something like a line, something like maybe we can get it back together, the eye of the tiger, Stallion. And when he goes back into the final fight in this new version with Drago, and now that we'll talk about this later, with more of the voiceovers and Creed being more present to him in a more spiritual way, I got to tell you, the Warrior's Code and the story arc of that throughout this new cut really, really hits hard for me, and it landed on me, and I really appreciate the new cut.
Well, that's the thing with me, is the more this movie is marinated, I'm like you, as I'm not completely there yet, but I'm like, you know, I might actually like this version.
Give it one more try and see how it settles on you.
Let me tell you.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, one thing I absolutely don't like is the new scrolling title. It's way too much. It's just, it's like Rocky 4, Rocky versus Drago. It's like,
yeah, but it's better than the dollar store boxing gloves.
Well, that's true.
Party City.
That was the only of course, that was the only film that didn't have the big letters coming across. I don't know if Rocky 3 did it. Yeah, they did. They did. But I thought it was very crowded. It just looked like he's like, yeah, we got to do that there because we do it in other movies, and it's got to. Yeah. But it's like maybe he could have just done Rocky 4 instead of Rocky 4 : Rocky v. Drago.
Weren't they stacked?
They were stacked, but it was just big, and I don't know. Anyway, I noticed that in the theater, and Mark actually chuckled at it. He's like, "Oh, that's a lot of information."
I'll tell you my favorite thing so far, though, about the movie. I've only seen it once, and I plan on watching it a few more times. My favorite thing that they did in this movie was what they did with Drago. The additions they gave him. Now, given they completely kind of turned it, on its head from how it was in the first movie, because in the first movie, Drago was this unstoppable,
it's a robot
Soviet machine that was coming in, and that's exactly how he was the entire movie until the end, where he kind of rebelled, and he was a menacing sign of his times. But what they did, all these great extra cuts that they put in, gave Drago so much more depth. And especially when you watch Creed 2, it just, the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is great. Like, you can see all that stuff happening now with Drago that wells up and that he holds for all those years later that you see in Creed 2. Well, and to me, that was the biggest win of this entire movie.
They definitely gave, just with the insertion of certain just little extra
It
bits.
wasn't much. It was little tiny stuff, but it was great.
Yeah.
Like
It was great.
looks. He would do a look or something.
Well,
Or
even during
somebody
like
said
he would
after
talk.
after he killed
talk.
Apollo, he kept saying, you know, the world will know Drago. He's like, Drago. You know,
Yeah.
he kept saying, and none of that was in the first one. He was always like, "You be dice,
No.
dice." That was
And
all
I
he
tell
would
you-
say. But like,
But
you could see he was there in this movie, and he wanted the world to know who he was. He wanted to be that star, and it was so great to see that finally
Okay.
come out with Drago.
well, before this totally gets away from us,
Yeah.
I want to try to keep it in order. And,
Yeah.
and we could okay,
Let it
so
roll.
so we go another thing, and I, for my part, I still find the opening of the director's cut very jarring. And I've watched it twice. Because we go from Rocky 3 immediately to Apollo in the pool with his golden retrievers. I mean, there's no break where Rocky comes home and his kid's got the
Mhm.
video camera and all that stuff. And we go straight to Apollo's pool. And there's extra business with him playing with the dogs and stuff. But then he watches the same news report, really. And there is when Brigitte Nielsen basically has her only dialogue in the film now.
So true.
Is
Chops
is
so
on that
much.
is on that TV report.
Yeah.
She does say the same stuff, but after that, man, it's like she doesn't have any lines in the movie.
It's true.
So I wonder if that's Stallone saying, "Hey, hey, Brigitte." I don't know, but
Well, she
and-
came to his defense, so maybe.
well,
I
you
don't
know, but apparently their interaction on Creed 2 was amicable and friendly. So, but
Did
so-
she text him nonstop? I wonder.
I don't know. So listen, don't bring that into it. So we go from this scene of Apollo and his dogs straight to Rocky's front yard, which is another brand new, never before
I think
seen,
it's his
thing,
backyard.
or whatever. It's got lions. He's
All
got
I know
lion
is-
statues.
All I know is that football and that bicycle didn't move. Every time you saw the backyard, it was in the same spot.
Yes, that's true. But I tell you what, I liked. Again, I when watching it the first time, I was still like, man, this is moving really fast. Like, okay, Rocky 3, Apollo gets angry. He's at Rocky's house. But I really liked the conversation they had on the lawn because it's something that was missing from the theatrical cut. And I think I even mentioned this when we did our podcast about Rocky 4 before. He said, I made a joke like, well, you know, they challenged Rocky and Apollo's like, no, I'm going to do it. I want to do it. Well, in this scene, you see Apollo basically ask, hey, is it cool if I do this? Do you really want to fight him? Or
So
is
what
it
did you
okay?
say? What did you say? He kept pressing.
He goes,
What-
I
what'd you
don't
say?
know. I mean, I don't know. But
You know what
so-
though? You know what I like? I'm gonna interject real quick. What I really liked Stallone's kind of response was, you know, A, he didn't have to fight him because, you know, Drago's just basically starting out. And second, he's like basically kind of like, I just want to see what kind of fighter he is. I want to kind of study him before I do
but
that.
Apollo's already constructed. He's constructed the grand vision in his head. He's like, this is a way this I can capitalize on propaganda. I can get in there. I can do this. And because
it shows his ego is what it does.
it does. And let me tell you something. I actually made a note of this. Carl Weathers, he is a superstar. He has, you know, and I don't think he gets a lot of credit for, I mean, of course he's very famous for his portrayal of Apollo, but I think just watching this and watching it in a theater, like Carl Weathers has charisma to spare.
Mhm.
He, like, I'm just watching him in that scene where he's holding the football talking to Rocky. I was thinking, why did Carl Weathers not become a superstar? Because he is great. And I love him. I love the fact that he's doing like Star Wars now on the Mandalorian. It's great to see him still doing stuff like that. But when he's Apollo Creed, I don't know if his legend has just grown in the years since, but I really think he was fantastic in this.
Yeah, even when you watch him in Rocky and Rocky 2, even though he's the adversary, you never really dislike him.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, he's a
And
great
Paolo.
actor, and I think a lot of times, and I hate to be so stereotypical, but a lot of times when actors are very physical, when they're in very good shape, sometimes they're not really taken as serious as the thespians that get nominated a lot of times. But yeah, man, straight up, Carl Weathers is fantastic in this movie, and getting to see him, do more acting, I was all in for, because I thought he was fantastic in the new cut.
Yeah. And that scene, I did enjoy that scene with them on the lawn.
Yeah, the first
And-
time I saw it, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't for me. It was very evident the first time I saw it that he was trying to form. A lot of the times when I was watching the movie the first time, I was asking myself, is he going to put the emphasis on getting new footage and just to show how radically different he can make this cut versus forming a good story and dealing with the footage he has? But I have to tell you, this first cut, or I'm sorry, this first scene where they're on the lawn, they don't do any insert shots. And I really felt like he didn't have any other footage to work with.
No,
and we can
that's
talk about
true.
this later. I know that, like Donner cut is going to get brought up later on this podcast, but I have completely different feelings about that. This is above the Donner cut. This is different than, Zack Snyder getting dumped millions of dollars into his front yard by HBO. I mean, he was working with scraps that were 35 years old and digging with things that had to work. And I thought he did a fantastic job in this new cut, but that lawn scene, you could tell, all right, I'm working with like probably single takes, because for me, the acting didn't work. Upon second and third viewing, I got to be honest with you, the scene, the acting, it all kind of melds to me. And I think maybe, again, I'm looking back on my first screening with you, Jared, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if I was just still being jarred by everything being new. Anything new was really standing out to me, and I was like overcritical of it.
And I remember in the theater with you, you were sitting to my right, and I was like in the first 10 minutes, I was like, I don't know if I like this or not.
Yeah,
and
I was questioning that too.
And I didn't want to look over at you because, I didn't want us to have that moment right at the beginning. Like, what the hell is going on here?
And it would have been over.
But,
but talking about the new stuff, not in general, but like, or in general for like the film scraps that he was working with, I gotta say, amazing that these scraps were in such great condition, because everything he put in for a movie as old as it is, and you always hear about movies that are a lot younger than this that have lost their footage, or like it just like gets damaged. This stuff was pristine. Everything that he put in, the sound, everything about it was just unbelievable.
You cannot tell the difference between the old footage that he's cutting in with the new stuff at all. And when you look at, like, I'll just give you an example. If you guys watch like the extended cut of Blues Brothers, when they go to any of the extra footage, it looks like VHS. It's very apparent that this is the new footage because it hasn't been kept properly. The fact that he had, and I saw an interview where he was talking about it was badly damaged film print. So the stuff he was working with. So whatever they did in the transcoding to get that footage to look as amazing as it did, I was blown away. And I do have to say, this new cut, really the way I try to think about it is, whenever you're putting a puzzle together, you always try to do the outside framing. And that's the way I look at this new cut. Because the framing is still there. He still has to get from A to B. His best friend still has to die. He still needs to go to Russia. He still needs to fight Drago. So you still have the framing of the puzzle piece. But the fact that he could get these scraps, these 35-year-old scraps that look as good as they do, to fit into the rest of the framing of that puzzle and still work out cognitively, I think is a miracle, in my opinion. I just want to put that out there.
But I also think, for me, my first experience, you get hit with so much new right up front. It was hard for me to get comfortable.
And that's why I was like, second and third viewings for me really work. And I encourage anyone else to go out and see it multiple times if you can.
Well, you're not going to go out anywhere and see it.
Or
you're going to watch
it.
But so we've lost the robot. The robot's gone.
With the CD player in it. Did you notice that? It has a CD player in it.
No, I didn't notice that.
I noticed that when I watched it the other night. I was like, oh, it has a CD player. That's high tech. They must be millionaires.
So, you know what? I really love Burt Young as Paulie. I love his performance.
And we lose a lot of Burt.
We don't get significant Burt until we're at the press conference.
Yeah,
where he's where he's talking trash to the Russians. But the robot is a timestamp.
Had to get rid of it. It was a
and plus, especially the way they roll it out.
Yeah, with the happy birthday, Paulie.
All the quick the little cut shots. Oh, it's so shitty.
That's definitely MTV.
You know who benefited from this cut was Talia Shire. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
she had some really good extra bits.
She held this cut together for sure.
And,
Absolutely. Agreed.
you know, when Rocky goes into the kitchen to talk to her, which is another brand new scene.
That's a great scene.
You know, he's like, because Rocky has always fallen back on her. Like, so, and in Rocky 4, we talked about this in our last podcast about this movie. In Rocky 4, Rocky just doesn't give a crap what Adrian says at all.
This
he's
is
going-
also the
He disappears since he's in Russia.
Yeah.
She tells
doesn't
him
even
he's
say
going to fail. She says you
Yeah.
are going to fail.
You
Yeah.
can't win.
But you know, but in this film, Adrian is more present,
Mhm.
and Rocky is, you know, when Apollo's like, no, I'm going to do this, and she's like, I think it's wrong. You guys are too old. You need to quit this crap.
And she has a great line where she says how she tells him she cares about him.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
she goes,
that really solidifies the bond of
Yeah.
friendship that they have at this point.
She's
That-
also,
that her
she's also the
line
conscious
does
of the
that.
audience. I mean, she's saying things like that make sense that weren't in the original cut. She's like talking common sense. What is the point of doing this? You're super old. What do you gain from
Yeah.
it except for your ego? I mean, she's
Mhm.
straight up laying it out. She is the
Yeah.
conscious of what everyone else in the audience is saying. Like, dude, what are you thinking, bro?
yeah, and so I think Talia Shires was her. I mean, her presence in this movie is definitely improved by the director's cut. And so, you know, again, along with Polly, Rocky's kid is basically out of the movie except for one scene.
I mean, he hates having his kid in
I
the
know.
movie anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, he never calls him by his name. I just want to say to my kid, Merry Christmas, kid.
Not anymore. No
At
more
what
Christmas
point
for this kid.
Hey,
No,
do
but
you
I-
remember his name?
But I got to tell you, this new cut, again, it's very adult to me, and it's a much more serious tone. So for me, I got to tell you, yes, when you cut out the robot, and this is fast forwarding a lot, but you know, when we get to the Drago versus Rocky fight later on, there's no cut-ins with the kid, and
Yes.
they were the comedic lightning of
Mhm.
that.
You
That
think
scene.
I am a nerd?
Yeah, exactly. That's my dad. And cheering. I mean, when you cut out that stuff and you're stuck in that ring and you can't get out and you have no chance to kind of take a step back and laugh a little bit, you're stuck in there in hell with Rocky. And I find this cut a lot more serious, and I take it a lot more serious.
Yeah.
Again, not to fast forward again, but even small things like there's this, you know, the famous line, hit the one in the middle. That's not repeated in this cut, because it's said once by Paulie. It's not repeated by Tony Burton this time. This is a much more serious touch, and just these little trimmings away of the jokes and cutting it down to a more serious tone. I got to tell you, man, I'm loving this new cut.
Okay.
So,
Well, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, I mean, I don't know if this is fast forwarding too much. So, since you guys have watched it more,
You know what? Forget what I said. Just talk about what you
No,
want. I can't keep this on track.
I'm sticking with
You're
the
never going to
timeline.
get scene by scene out of this.
timeline. Let me
Okay,
talk.
go ahead.
So, okay, so they have that. You know, they're watching the match. You know, Paul's. You know, they have these great. You know, it's kind of cool that they're watching.
Are you talking
their-
about after
their
dinner?
fight. Yeah,
right?
after dinner.
Okay.
And so in the theatrical, now you can correct me if I'm wrong. It seems in the theatrical, in the new cut, Rocky isn't as enthused about helping Apollo as he is in the theatrical. Is that
I'll agree with that.
accurate?
I would also
'Cause-
say the addition of the Bill Conti music sets a
Yeah.
more somber tone to that scene.
Because
Yes.
Apollo asks him, "Are you going to help me?" And if I'm not mistaken, in the new cut, Rocky just kind of nods his head and says yes. But in the theatrical, he stands up and they kind of joke about it. Am I wrong? I mean, I could be. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly. I just get the sense that Rocky was a little more reluctant
Yeah.
in
And
the
no,
new version.
I think you're 100% correct.
You probably are.
And,
I
like-
I really enjoyed the warrior must be dead speech with the Conti music. For me, I was like, oh my god, this.
Oh yeah,
is
the warrior might
fantastic.
as well be dead, Stallion.
Yeah, with that music now, it's great.
Matt, listen, putting Bill Conti into this movie was a stroke of genius. And, you know, they didn't lose all of Vince DiCola's stuff.
And I liked Vince DiCola's score, so
But-
having both of those put together for me worked.
I think, but, you know, you really need the Conti piano,
Mhm.
you know, and those soft strings when Rocky is having a heart to heart with somebody. I mean,
Mhm.
you miss it when it's not there.
Yeah.
And I mean, heck, that's something they've even carried over to the Creed movies. They bring Bill Conti's music over. So Yeah, you're right. There is a much more somber, Rocky seems more reluctant. And I think that goes along with the fact from what Adrian told him earlier in the scene. Like, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing this?
And even he's like in his head going, ugh.
Yeah. But see, like, all of a sudden, almost immediately, I don't think even 20 minutes into the movie now, we're in Las Vegas. We are there fast, faster, I think, than the theatrical version. I mean, this thing like escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk about the press conference.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a huge difference except for the extra Drago moments. But what I do want to comment, I don't know if we talked about before, but what I really like about is, and this goes to Carl Weathers, is how it starts to get intense, between them and the Russians. But then as Carl walks off, or Apollo, he's like, so how'd I look? It was like a game to him.
Yeah, like
which sets up
what
happens later even better. It's a better setup. But I just love that about him, that whole showman thing, where it was just like hey, did I look pretty good?
But that's Apollo. He's setting it all up in his head. He's like,
it's a show.
But of course, the Russians, and I think it shows it better in this cut, the Russians were, walk away from that insulted. It's a much more of an offensive thing to them, and it's shown that way much more so than what it was in the theatrical version.
I did not come here to lose. He says that. So yeah, I do like the extra moments there with Drago. Again, Bridget Nielsen doesn't talk at all in the press conference, which is a change.
So when they share that cigarette, do you think there's something going on between them?
Probably. I mean, Drago's son probably isn't even his.
All I know is I saw it, watching that scene with the cigarette, it was pretty far down on that finger. I'm thinking, oh God.
Yeah, they're going to be smoking the filter here in a minute.
Almighty.
Or maybe it's a non-filter Russian cigarette. Who knows? But anyway, so we got the press conference. And then once we get to Las Vegas, we spend some extra time with Drago in the basement. I think, again, referring back to our old show, I thought, well, what do? They just tell Drago to go downstairs and stand in the dark and, hey, we'll bring you out when we're ready. But no, you go down there and you see there's all this security.
Where do we put Drago? Where is he?
And his trainers are down there with him.
Right.
And here's something interesting, and this is totally a nerd thing. You notice there is a black man who is one of his trainers.
He's the American one.
No, he is, according to the novelization written by Sylvester Stallone, he is from Cuba.
Oh, I thought he was
also a communist country. He is one of his Cuban trainers, which I thought was kind of an interesting touch. But anyway, so they're down there in the basement with Drago for a few extra. There's a few, just, hey, you got this, do a good job. And we linger with Drago longer down there as he's just getting ready to ascend.
Yeah, because we're changing it from the comic book nature that the original cut was into a more, this is an actual boxing movie. I really felt that throughout the film, that there was a lot of touches that really kind of took it away from the over the top, like action genre type movie into like, this is kind of a serious boxing movie. And this is a real boxer. He's not just some kind of symbol of something. He's an actual boxer. And I really liked a lot of the additions with Drago.
I tell you what, Deke, for a few terrifying seconds, I thought they might lose living in America.
I did too, and I'm so glad.
Did they extend that living in America? Because it seemed, I mean, I haven't watched the original since we did our podcast. It seemed like it was a lot longer version of it.
It wasn't longer there, but it was cut differently.
Yeah, everything was. Hey, I got a question for you guys, because this is a question I've had probably for a very long time. But you have this Russian who's stuck in the middle of a USA Pride parade, and out of nowhere, the Red Baron swoops by, and a puzzle-pieced golden bull with smoke coming out of his nostrils and ruby red eyes is assembling itself. What is going on in this scene? It's like America threw up.
It's so weird.
I don't understand.
It's a perfect example of capitalistic greed.
But what is the bull, though? I don't understand.
American excessive.
And the Red Baron.
The economy? The Red Baron, I don't get, but
I don't get it.
The Red Baron.
Bull of Wall Street. I wonder if
I don't know, but
I
you're
never
right. It's
understood
like
it.
this goat's head that's
It's kind of
disassembling.
cool looking.
It's cool, but if you stop and think about it, like, well, what does it,
What's-
what are we saying to the Russian? Like when Rocky goes to Russia, you feel like you're in Russia. You get the steampunk.
Oh, yeah, you got
steampunk
the-
music. You know, you get the lights coming down, and man, that
It's
score
an
is awesome. by the way, but-
expedition. Was a exhibition match. Plus, when the bullhead assembles,
I mean,
and
that's
it comes
Vegas
out.
for you, but none of that made sense to me as far
Yeah,
as like
it's
the
it's
display we're
crazy.
putting. I mean, we got red and white
To
blue
me-
dancers going everywhere.
But I mean, I guess
fireworks,
what I
and
It
then
was
said-
Las
the Red Baron.
Vegas. It was a big.
I think you
show.
put it all together. And what I said in our when we were talking about it in the last podcast we did, is that when he comes up, it's like, you know, I always thought it's a lot like King Kong being lifted up for the first
Oh
time.
yeah.
And
He's just on
It's-
display. as this
everything is
freak.
happening
Okay.
to him, and there's like everything is just completely foreign and crazy.
We'll make the
and, like,
plane a Russian plane if they're going to fly
I
by
mean,
Kong. I don't understand the Red
nobody can
Baron.
explain. In fact,
Was
somebody
it like sponsored by a pizza? What is that pre-show about?
it's got to be out there somewhere. That information has to be there somewhere.
Yeah.
About why they chose the red.
Never
Baron.
understood that.
Russian. He's not
Hey,
German.
you want to really scare the hell out of a really 7-foot tall Russian? Put a bull together. What does that even mean? I had like
I don't
no
know.
idea what that meant. Oh,
Well,
also,
now,
throw in a Red
now
Baron.
you're
if
making
you
me
could.
think about it. What does the bull mean?
Oh, we got to move on
We'll
from
figure it
this.
Sorry.
So, but I was happy to see James Brown's number was intact because I mean I think that is a kind of a seminal moment in
Plus,
Rocky
it's
IV.
perfect Apollo.
Oh yeah, and you know they keep talking, and the announcers do this too. You know, Apollo's over the hill, but man, Carl Weathers is in the best shape of his
Holy
life.
crud, dude.
You know, and he's
Everybody in
probably
this movie.
younger. He's probably younger than we are now.
Well, he's I
No
think
way,
he
he's
was
probably younger than us
Yeah.
when he was playing
Oh,
that role.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah, he was probably in his early 40s, but he is
Oh yeah, he's
jacked.
old.
He's got shoulder for miles, man. He is in fantastic shape. I mean, I think he looks better in this movie than he did in Predator. Like he is like really
Yeah,
jacked in this
and
movie.
I think he looks better in this movie than he did in the previous Rocky films.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
100.
He's,
no
I
question.
mean,
He's a
yeah.
beast. He's a
tip
but-
top shape.
but then you know Dolph has got about 1.5 feet on him, and he is also a specimen in this movie. But so let's talk about the fight between Apollo and because this is a totally different version of this fight.
Now I want to say, when I saw this the first time, I guess it's probably on HBO because that's what we had. That got dark fast. Like I saw it as a
Yes.
kid. Now, for me, the Rocky movie was Rocky 3. That's the one I saw ad nauseum on HBO. So Rocky 4, I was kind of like, you know, growing out of it a little bit. But I will say, man, that got dark fast because you're like, I mean, that was really brutal. Even the theatrical version.
Yeah, it's
But-
a tough.
But in this new version, it gets dark for longer. And that's why this is more painful to watch. This new cut of the Creed versus Drago fight for me is far superior than the theatrical cut, like far superior.
Mhm.
I mean, by the time you go into the break between round 1 and 2, he has already been punched into a meat sack. He's
Mhm.
nothing. They add an additional knockout, which for me, again, when he stands up after that first knockout, he really does look like Michael B. Jordan for a second when he is just dazed and he's got blood coming out of his mouth. Like that really for me connected the sequels and the spinoffs for me with that extra shot of him getting knocked out. And then for this new cut, there is an insert shot where Stallone is in the corner with him between round 1 and 2. And with tears in his eyes, he says, "Man, don't do this to me."
Oh,
And I got to tell you, man, I've watched this movie a couple times, and that line has knocked the wind out of me every single time. And without a beat, Creed falls right back up with his ego and says, "I'm doing this for me." And then, man, that little 5 seconds, not to get
Yeah.
emotional, but like that little exchange right there for me makes the entire director's cut worthwhile. But just that shot alone and that scene, it killed me, man. It's something that when I'm not, I know you guys are huge Creed 2 fans. I am not at all. I absolutely love the first Creed movie. And I got to tell you, the next time I watch the next Creed movie, I'm going to be thinking about the new cut of how Apollo gets obliterated. And it's probably going to get me a lot more emotional next time. It really did something for me.
Well, I tell you what, that is a great delivery by Stallone, and But I will tell you,
And again, 35-year-old scraps, guys. Every single thing that you guys do enjoy about this new cut is a miracle. 35 years of scraps, and they're in
Scraps.
pristine condition. And we only got this because COVID kicked in, and he had to stop filming the movie he's filming right now. This is a miracle of a cut, to be honest with you. I can't say it enough.
but he also, in this new cut, Apollo in the first round does not go out like a punk. He
No.
he lands a lot of shots on
It's a
Drago.
real boxing movie now, guys.
Yeah, and it's
real.
like, and it's like, they have lost the car door slamming sound effects of the punches. The punches are more,
Oh,
it's like
dude.
meat. It's like meat.
Absolutely. Sound effects were all redone. Sound great.
Were they? I
A
was
lot more
wondering if they
grunts.
had been. I was
They
curious.
were, yeah.
They
Absolutely.
brought it way down.
So
But-
they went away from the
sounds
cannon
realistic.
gunshots from Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it's like bam, bam. But I think Apollo, it does play out like a real boxing match, because it's not just, Apollo coming out dancing and then getting obliterated. It's
Mhm.
Apollo gets some shots in on him, and it's very deliberately paced. It's like a real fight. If you watch a real boxing match, it's not like a Rocky movie. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a lot of, dancing around and, hug, and locking them up and everything. And that's what this felt like. But
Yeah.
until Drago, the last part of the first round, when he starts to,
And
and
gets activated.
but for like the first half of this first round, Drago looks like a dope. He's just sitting there doing this.
Yeah, he has that weird look on his
But
face.
I know he's like,
he had that in a theatrical cut, and it never
Yeah.
really played that well to me. In this new cut, it plays more like he's interacting and he's just kind of getting a feel for Creed. It feels more like a boxing match. So when his trainer says attack him, or whatever
Yeah.
he says in Russian, it sounded like attack him. But when he says that, it's a lot more serious this time, because you've seen him just kind of dance around and interacting with Creed, and Creed's landed about 40 punches by this point,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it works.
I wonder if it's because they've humanized them a little bit in this version.
They've just he's just brought in a sense of realism.
Well, yeah.
Both of the main boxing matches in this movie are super serious now, and they play very well, especially this
Yeah.
one. And sorry to interject, I do have to say, the star of this new cut, besides Carl Weathers, is his wife, because all the little
Yes.
cut-ins when he gets attacked by Drago the first time, we never saw this before, but they cut in a quick little shot of his wife, like, whoa, take him back. And in this new cut, oh crap, he's in serious danger.
And
then go ahead.
no, I was going to say the shots of Marianne, his wife, they pepper them in from the beginning when they're filing in there.
Mhm.
When James Brown, she looks uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
it's just these quick little shots.
She knows
but-
he's been cheating on him. Just
Oh, well, that's true. Maybe,
He's like, after
just
this
found
fight, I'm
out.
gonna have a talk with him.
Yikes.
but that
Well,
that-
now
kill him.
thank you for bringing it up. Now I'm not going to appreciate those looks as much anymore. The fifth time I watch this
Yeah,
movie.
she's rooting for Drago. Actually, she's like, yeah, come on, take
Flipped
him
him a
out.
5 before the fight.
cheating as sober.
But no, so but yeah, just those quick inserts of her
Absolutely
eyes.
fantastic.
Now I will
And-
say I do miss when Drago's wife says, "I hope we can be friends," because that's almost like a wolf tricking. Like she's like, "Oh, my husband is about to
Yep.
kill your
You
husband."
know what, though?
I
They-
know that.
He really did take a lot of the Russian bad guy, like the stereotypical Russian Soviet bad guy, out of the mix, and just really focused on.
I
the
just felt
boxing.
like
Yeah.
like that made her like very conniving.
Yeah,
Like,
but that goes back to the comic book feel of the original cut. This is
I
a
think
more
that could
serious
have.
tone.
I think that could have still worked, but that's just my opinion.
It's not a terrible line. It's a fun line. The original cut is a
To me,
fun
it's
movie
to me it's
watch.
ominous when she says, "I
Mm.
hope we can be friends afterwards." It's like she's lying. She's
After
totally
your
lying.
Husband is 6 feet under. We'll be
Yeah, she's
friends.
like she knows she's good. She knows
well,
Drago's going to obliterate Apollo, but when she's like, "I hope we can be friends."
well, I think the the break between rounds, like Deke was talking about, there's some good stuff there. Again, and another, and maybe it's just because I like him, Tony Burton's Duke
No,
Evers.
more
Man,
Tony
he's-
Burton, please.
he's the
Always.
best.
He's
the
so
best.
great.
He is good, and he gets more to do. Yeah, he gets more to do here, and
love it.
so you know, that after the round break, going into round two, it plays. There must be some small differences, but it's still a pretty quick knockdown once the match or once the round starts. And Stallone actually said in the documentary he wanted to cut it so he's about to throw the towel, but he's in the process of throwing the towel before the last punch lands.
It worked perfect.
Yeah. And so he can say, well, you know, I was wanting to stop it, and then, you know, it was too late.
It was too late. He missed it. Yeah. But that whole scene worked out perfect because
I agree.
Him standing there, not throwing it versus, you know, seeing, like, you could see he's up there and it was just that last punch destroyed him. Apollo was gone and he just missed the whole chance. It was great. It was great.
And
I mean,
I agree.
there's so much good stuff that they salvaged for this movie. Just like Rocky, good Rocky and good like Sylvester Stallone acting moments that he must have been like just distraught and upset to see. Like the theatrical cut, as exciting as blockbuster as it was, how much money it made, he still was like, man, I had good stuff, like good acting quality stuff that was just discarded.
I'll tell you now, you guys need to watch that documentary because he addresses this. And he's amazed, you know, almost 40 years later that he shot all this stuff. Because, you know, he directed part 4 and he goes, it's a miracle that we shot all this extra stuff that I have now to go through.
When you look back now, when you see, again, going back to Creed's wife, and she is now screaming more after her husband has just died right in front of her own eyes, and she can't get through the crowd now. That extra footage of her not being able to get through the crowd to her dead husband, that's the stuff that, for me, when you look back and you're like, bro, you really miss an opportunity to not have this in a theatrical cut. This is emotional gold to watch now. And again, I think she really kind of came out as far as like that sequence, her additions and her little pepper shots that got peppered in, I think really added to that sequence for me. That was a
Did
big
he
win.
go over in the documentary on how or where this stuff was stored, like where he was grabbing it from? Like,
No.
did he have it in his possession the whole time and he was storing it, or did like
during the documentary, it's all there on an Avid. I mean, you see it. I mean, he's got, it's all been digitized, you know.
I saw a separate interview where he mentioned, he was making a joke about how he, you know, when he was deciding what movie he was going to recut, he was potentially going to recut the original Rocky. But when he went back to MGM, they don't have the original 35 millimeter print of the film. He
doesn't need to touch that. He doesn't need to touch that.
I agree.
That's not his.
Well,
it's John Alvidson's.
He was thinking about it, but he had mentioned,
needs to cut 5.
He mentioned that too, but he also mentioned, he made a joke. He's like, well, you guys still have the original print for Don't Shoot. No, wait, Don't Stop or My Mom Will Shoot or whatever that movie is. But he was like seriously pissed that they still have a good scan of that movie, but they don't have the original Rocky film. But so I don't know. I forget what he said as far as his answer, as far as like where the footage was. But again, just being able to sort through 35-year-old stuff. I mean, you know, the difference, again, I mentioned the Zack Snyder cut. You know, the difference between him getting millions and millions and millions of dollars to reshoot footage, and you have a DIT on set and they're logging all the footage, and anything you want, you can just call it up because it's labeled there and you have it properly, versus Stallone, I'm assuming, going through, just rummaging through, again, 35 years worth of scraps, trying to put, again, this new puzzle piece together. I cannot stress how important and how rare that this new cut is, to come back 36 years later and to see something this pretty intelligent and a lot more mature. You know, I think it's fantastic. It's a huge difference between, again, the Donner cut, or like, you know, I think like Orson Welles had his last movie finally redone and put
Touch
out.
of Evil.
No, his last movie was just released recently, and that's someone else putting together what they thought Orson Welles would do, versus this is the creator of the theatrical cut 35 years later, much more mature and wanting to redo a story. There's a huge difference there, and being able to do that with scraps, I think, is fantastic.
Did he re-edit from the I guess, did he start from scratch and just recut the whole movie?
No, well, there's things that are exactly the same almost.
Okay, I didn't
frame
know
for frame.
if he like just basically looked at it as just going
Well,
in.
I will
He
say a
did
lot of
with
things
a
that even
clean
are the same
slate.
scenes, he still added in different angles. Like I
Yeah.
think
That's
I think
what I
Jared, you
mean,
could probably
like-
back me up on this. Like especially during the fights, he talks about how a lot of times in fights, in real fights, you don't have a great view of it. And he kind of wanted more of a crowd perspective. A lot of the new angles that he takes are very spectator. They're shots that you would get maybe from an HBO covering of the sporting event. So it feels a lot more real. And I really appreciate, even though the scene isn't really altered per se, much like a training sequence that maybe has like 1 or 2 new cuts, it's still the same sequence. It just has these new different angles that tell a different story that I appreciated.
So this brings us to another mostly new scene, is his funeral.
Now, this
Tony,
is one of those scenes where you're like, why wasn't this in the theatrical?
yeah, Tony Burton has a nice speech.
Great
Again,
speech.
Duke Evers gets a chance to talk about Apollo because, that was his best friend.
He starts off a funeral with a line, "Men are made for the end at the beginning." How much darker can you get than something like that, man? I mean, if you don't think that this movie's already more serious, let Tony Burton take over the frame, let him do some acting and start off a funeral sequence with "Men are born to die." Like, what the heck is going on? That is a super dark start.
But it
to
was
a
really
funeral
the funeral that Apollo deserved.
Agreed. And sorry guys. And I will say, when you see choices like this, you can tell that this is, to let Tony Burton go first is a very mature decision. These are cuts and decisions that are being made by a much more mature director versus a writer, director, and movie star at the peak of his fame. I mean, the difference to let someone else take the frame and outact him. And he still does a good job later on in the sequence, but I mean, to let Tony Burton go first and take the limelight and have some amazing dialogue, it's just, it's a more mature story now.
In the theatrical, Sly was the only one who talked but you think about it, for the story, Tony Burton has been with Apollo his whole life. So of course, I'm glad that they gave him that chance to do that scene. And one thing I liked about Rocky's speech is that it's the first time Rocky has ever acknowledged that Apollo is responsible for his career. He's like, everything I have is because of what Apollo did for me.
He gave him a chance.
Yes. And that's the first time in those movies that's ever, even Rocky 3, when Apollo's trying to build him up and bring him back. This is the first time he's ever acknowledged that from part 1, he's the one who brought me out of it. Everything my family has, all the stuff that's happened to me is because of Apollo. I thought that was a great acknowledgement of that. And I don't even remember. I mean, he said something totally different in the theatrical cut, but I definitely like this better.
Yeah.
And then he has that scene with Adrian at the end, like, I let it happen. It's, it's my fault. And, she's like, just stop it, cut it out. But you start to see, he already can't live with himself. So now after the funeral, we come up to, I believe, I think this is the
boxing
new
commission,
the new scene with the boxing commission, which was a bit of a missing piece really in the theatrical cut, because even though it's glossed over in some kind of off-screen voiceover dialogue in the theatrical, this explicitly spells out that Rocky's not the champ anymore.
Yeah,
this is right. You're like, if you don't, if you go fight this guy, you're going to be stripped of your title. And it's probably, that's something that people probably figured out on their own, but I think it's a nice touch. I don't think it's 100% necessary, but I appreciated seeing it.
Only seeing this movie one time, I'll tell you, that was the weakest new scene out of the whole movie for me. Now, that said, the information you get out of it is important and it helps the story along, but by far and away, that I could see why that was cut. The acting.
I agree, Matt.
It's a very old, it's like time stamping that movie way in the past. Not that it's an old movie, but it's like, didn't like the scene.
I will say the scene. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just gonna say, for me, it was kind of a callback to the first two movies, and that's kind of what I got out of it. It was sort of like, it reminded me of Rocky 1 and 2 when everyone's sitting around the table and negotiating. I kind of appreciated that.
For me, I'll be honest with you. I agree with Matt. There's a couple scenes in here that aren't the best acted, and you can tell he is still working with the cuts that he had. And I'm not saying, because I always have to go by what I see up on the screen. I can never go by what the behind the scenes drama is or what went into the making of or whatever. I got to go by what I'm looking at up on screen right now. So I do have to say, not all the scenes are the best. And so sometimes there are scenes that are put into the movie that I feel drive the story to where he needs versus, okay, I'm putting in the best cut of something, because there's some scenes in here like this one that aren't the best written or best acted, but they formulate the story that Stallone's trying to do with his new cut. So, give or take.
So it's not long after this. I think are we having the news conference next, I believe.
Yeah, the Russian press junket.
Yeah. And this is where, Rocky says that he's going to Russia to fight. And Polly's like, "Are you nuts?"
I'm the unsilent majority.
Yeah. Yeah. He's so is there a huge difference in this scene?
Yeah, they add that Russian steampunk music from his entrance into the ring later on in the movie, and that worked for me. Again, anytime we have, like, going back to the warrior, then the warrior must be dead, getting the Conti music, just reoccurring themes. When you're trying to put a symphony together, and if you want to lump in the Creed and all six, sometimes I'd like to eliminate five, but if you'd like to include all six and then the Creed movies, you're creating a symphony, and you have to have reoccurring themes in that symphony. And so to put that Russian music back in for the Russian press junket, for me, that worked. It just kind of built up the seriousness of the Russian character, just hearing that gas release music that they have in the background.
And I think there's an extra beat added at the end of the scene that wasn't in theatrical, where it's a wide shot, and Rocky is the last one. Rocky and Drago are the last ones at that table, and they sit next to each other for like a beat. And then Drago gets up and tucks his hat under his arm and leaves. But there is an extra beat where it's just the two of them at that table still sitting next to each other.
There's a couple echoes in this movie, and I don't want to fast forward too much, but there's a scene at the end of the Drago Rocky fight that we'll talk about later that kind of mirrors that. These are sportsmen, and they're, I think in this new cut, you feel like there's a little bit of a, shaking hands at the end of a soccer game type of appreciation going on in this new cut. Just want to put that out there. We can talk about it later, but I just thought, yeah, you're right. Seeing them just kind of linger there together by themselves. It's just them two anyways. Who cares about what the countries and everyone else in Polly and the propaganda and all the other stuff in the press junkets about? That's all the press making all that stuff. It really comes down to the two of these people, and seeing them linger on the table for an extra beat, I thought helped. And again, mirrors what goes on and what we'll talk about later at the end of the Drago fight.
So we get home, and this is before the montage.
And you can tell now with the boxing commission sequence now, you can tell that he's had a long day. He's been out of the house for a while. Him coming home late at night, now you know what he's been doing all day. And that kind of,
they still come home for some comfort and some understanding.
You hated this. I remember you guys in the original podcast. It's so funny.
Well, so
she redeems herself a lot in this new cut.
But yeah, there is an extended conversation now between Rocky and Adrian during this, and she comes across in this a little more sympathetic, but more desperate, almost, to be like, just please don't go. She doesn't understand, and I think that comes across more in the new footage.
This scene for me was a huge win. One of the big things about this sequence, is the editing. This really shows off for me what Stallone was trying to go after, because, you know, in the original cut, he has that secret, he has that speech where he goes into Drago's got to be willing to die to beat me. And it's all about him and him and him and him. And honestly, that sequence in the original cut, now looking back on it, does not work for me at all. Because in this new cut, right after she screams, "You cannot win," Stallone just lingers on a shot of himself on Rocky. He just sits there, and Rocky is absolutely devastated by what she has said. He mentions something about Adrian always telling the truth. And then he just slumps out the door, completely defeated by the love of his life. And out of all the knockouts he's had throughout this entire series, you can tell on his face for the first time that this one hurt the most. And the thing about this new cut with this new edit is that he cuts it before he does that stupid speech. Of course, it's voiced over later on when he's scrapbooking in the Russian mirror, but, you know, which I can live or take, you know, take without, but he cuts out. And so when you linger on that shot of Rocky and he's like, "Oh my God, my wife, who has never lied to me," throughout all the series, you guys have to admit, she's never not told the truth. You know what I mean? And this is the first time she straight up to his face says, "You're not going to win." And this is the biggest defeat, I think, out of the entire series, is to see that. And this is a real fight between probably the most famous couple in cinema history. I don't think anyone throughout, you know, would disagree that this is probably the most biggest power couple in all cinema history, and we're watching them break up for the first time. This is huge, this new cut. I think the new edit of this scene is fantastic, and cutting it off before he goes in that stupid speech, I think, is totally devastating. I love this new scene. I love it.
Oh, well, I think this scene too is a good, shows why she could not be in the 6th movie. Because she would not let him do that.
Can you imagine that speech?
Yeah, no, there would be no Rocky 6. I'm gonna go. No, you're not. Go back to the restaurant.
Yeah,
but
hey, get back in the kitchen, Rocky.
I think Deke's absolutely right, though. And you know what's interesting about what they've done in this cut is, you know, in the first movie, the theatrical cut, you really, especially around this time in the movie, you feel that he's torn inside, not because of him and Adrian, but like about what happened to Apollo and Drago. It's the drama of that's really tearing him up. But in this movie, you really get the dual conflict. It's the Apollo, you know, losing Apollo, but it's also his relationship is the same thing. It's like you're getting two different things pulling at him at the same time, involving the fight. And you know, I think you lost in the theatrical cut that entire relationship aspect, even though it's like you get that you can't win. He's like, "Oh, whatever." And then he goes as a 80s montage of Drago. You know, this is really focusing that, and the dialogue, the choice of dialogue, and then later I'll get to it when they kept the scene with him and the son is true DNA Rocky together, like what you used to get, the DNA writing. You know, it's still there, and that piece that they put back in is a pure diamond of Rocky DNA.
Let me tell you something right now. I thought I could have lost the montage.
I couldn't believe they kept it in there.
Okay, look, I've been waiting to say this. I have to say it real quick. They almost went full 80s. You never go full 80s on a movie.
You know, the thing about that scene is, you know, he's not driving. You know, he's just sitting in a car.
I agree.
Just doing this.
Listen.
He's looking down. He's doing like 80 miles.
Yeah,
he's like here.
Yeah, the road's in front of you.
Now,
I agree.
And you hear thunk, 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 thunk.
Okay, now, Deke, I want to hear what you have to say about this, but I would like to think this is where I feel Stallone just did not commit to what he was trying to do. He's like, if he really wanted to make this film more timeless, there were a few parts of this movie where I think, to me, it feels like he was like, well, I mean, I can't lose this because, I mean, it's part of what people,
staple of Rocky.
This is what people love. And I get that. But, you know, the way this movie is cut now, the way it's assembled, this sticks out like a sore thumb. And it's not like the James Brown sequence, because that's part of what's happening on the screen. And it's not like later the Hearts on Fire montage, because that's that's part of the story. That's what he's doing. This is just putting the brakes on the movie so he can revisit old film clips. So tell me, you're the Rocky IV Jedi Master.
Here's the thing I'll say about it. Again, just backing up just one quick tick. Right before we get into our very expensive Lamborghini and go on a joyride, he's never been lower throughout the entire series, guys. His best friend just died, just came from the funeral, and his wife basically just broke up with him. He's never been lower. So he is still exercising and dealing with his demons. I'm not saying the scene works or doesn't work. I still have fun with it. That's the only thing I'm going to say about that. I do have some issues though, and I have some questions for you guys. He changes the sequence to black and white. Here's my issue with that. I don't dream in black and white. I dream in color. And like for him to change it black and white like that, I'm thinking to myself, like, who is this guy? Like David Lynch? The fact that he still left in the Adrian sequence with her at the top of the stairs and she's in black and white. I'm thinking, oh, you mean that thing that just happened 30 seconds ago is now a distant black and white memory? Like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
That for me, changing it black and white, that's the problem I had with it. Again, it's grown. I hate to keep saying this, but the more you watch the movie, it seeps into you and you just become comfortable with it. Again, everything is just so jarring the first and second time you see it. It just grows on you. But man, that black and white, especially that Adrian at the top of the stairs, I'm like, I literally just saw this. This is not a distant memory. Why are we going black and white with this? So that made no sense to me at all.
So. What might have helped too is that they'd had some shots of the car driving down a road or something. It was just all close-ups. It was like they were on a set. That was clearly he was not driving. He was not.
He could have stole some lost highway footage from.
No
David Lynch
kidding.
or something.
It's like it just felt phony.
So here's the other call out that I had.
It felt phony.
I'm only going to say this because
phony.
Right. Gotcha. Well, I'm only going to say this because I worked with you guys before, but I swear to God, and again, I've seen this on a properly calibrated monitor, but I'm positive that he put a skin softener on his face on this new cut. I am positive of it. He looks like he's taken his wife's skincare because he is gorgeous in this new cut. He is so beautifully, just no wrinkles. There is a skin softener going on in that sequence, and that's not a cut on his wife's.
he does have access now to digital tools.
Well, I'm just saying, if you watch and I put them side by side, I'm like, yeah, I can see the bags under his eyes in the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
Where do they go? Like, he looks gorgeous in the new cut. Just putting that out there.
He's like, that's how I looked. No,
Hey, I don't know.
it ruined me in the theatrical guide.
It's the film stock. I don't know. Okay, so having said that, that's the one place I feel he didn't fully commit to this.
I can't argue with you guys, but
this new vision.
It's so fun that I don't care.
And it was great. And
scene.
and watching and seeing it like in the theater, I was seeing those images on the big screen for the first time, like scenes from past Rocky movies. It was really cool because I've never seen 1 through 3 in the theater. So,
well, they're black and white now. You still technically haven't seen
them.
I
haven't seen them really. So,
Mr. Artsy.
And so again, he takes his drive down the Blade Runner tunnel.
Yes.
Yep.
Second Street Tunnel, which is also, I know, Matt, you're a fan of Gattaca. That's also the Gattaca tunnel right there that they get stalled in the green lighting. That's the same.
Is that the
tunnel.
tunnel from?
I recommend you guys see Gattaca.
Yeah, I know.
Just putting it out there.
Is that the tunnel from Back to the Future 2 as well?
No, that's a different tunnel.
Okay.
That's in California.
That's right. This is Philadelphia.
Well, for the record, that Second Street Tunnel is not in Philadelphia. That's in LA also. That's
okay.
Yeah.
A deception.
Anyway, we get, before he leaves for Russia, another great scene with Adrian, because before, the only interaction we saw was him looking up and her like walking away from the window, and it's like, hey, there's Adrian giving you another middle finger.
But at the same time, this is the Adrian scene was at the end of after he's done with his son, right? After that scene.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
he talks to his son. Yeah. We can talk about that.
Just real quick. I thought that scene with him and his son was, since they took all the other scenes that were ridiculous out of the movie that he chopped with the robot and, all the stuff with the Paulies, in the beginning, the first time you see his son really, there's some real interaction besides the dinner table when they dismiss him.
It's when he's in his room.
And I think that plays out really nice. it actually fits, I think, better in the movie now. And actually, I felt, maybe because I'm watching this now as a dad and instead of as a 10-year-old kid, but watching that scene, and that's the first kind of like real talk he's had with him in the movie. I liked it a lot. And I know it was in the movie before, but like I think seeing it now without seeing any other real footage of him earlier in the movie, I think played really well. And I think it put a lot of emotion. And I listened to the dialogue a lot closer.
Well, it's new dialogue that he says to him. He doesn't repeat what he said in the theatrical.
And it echoes.
It is like
6.
now. Listen, in Rocky IV, we said he's very polished. He's his suit and tie, kind of like Hollywood Rocky. He's not like from the street of Philadelphia in the first 2 movies. If you listen to this dialogue, that is old school Rocky talking to his son. It's not the Hollywood Rocky. It's like, again, here we are. We've got some real good old school Rocky talking to his son. Go back and listen to it again and listen to how he talks to his son. And I have to tell you, I feel like I'm watching like Rocky 1 here with that guy talking to me versus like a Hollywood Rocky and like the theatrical Rocky 4. I like it immensely more.
Does it seem like he cut out like a lot of the stuff that made him look dumb in this one?
It's his prerogative. I mean,
because I was watching the theatrical, and he's like, when he's washing the car and he gets like the phone, he gets mixed. I don't know. There's this like,
he kept himself in a lot of questionable sweaters in the movie. So
I don't know. I forgot how to use a phone. It seems like he's not as
well. That's also involved the robot, so the robot had to go. So, but
so Jared, you liked the "I never asked you to stop being a woman, so don't ask me to stop being a man" scene.
I did like it. Yeah. We could
that one was one that didn't really work for me. It's better than the cake sequence, which is what it replaces, but because that scene is stupid as hell, and goofy. But that line, I never asked you to stop being a woman, don't ask me to stop being a man. That didn't land for me. But that's just me though.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that it's a callback to Rocky 2. But it's not so much that, it's just the interaction. They kiss.
It needed the scene. You're right.
Yeah,
it needed that breath.
They kiss. They hug each other. So he's not going off to Russia with his wife mad at him.
Yeah.
Which
never go to Russia with your wife mad.
No, you don't ever want to do that. And so I appreciated that and Talia Shire also does a great job. She's just really upset, and she's selling that really well. And I think then we go to Russia and we've got Survivor.
Such a contrast to how she is in the Godfather movie.
Yeah, it is totally. But we get to Russia with some Survivor playing. Two worlds collide, rival nations.
Now, that scene is a little music video-y too.
A little bit, yeah. And it's from what I can tell, it's very, very similar to what had come before.
Hey, I like when I do like the additional Paulie scene where he steps off and Rocky's like, "Hey, why are you wearing Adrian's earmuffs?" And he's like, "They look better on me." That was a great line. That was fantastic.
Man, when Paulie steps into the snow and falls over, he makes this noise. He makes this sound like I don't know. Burt Young is great. He's hilarious. Okay, so but I did like the earmuffs line.
Yeah, that was a great
really
line.
good.
I think everyone laughed in the theater on that one. It was pretty good.
Yeah, because it was a brand new little bit of business there too. Yeah. So and then we get Dracula's cousin, according to Polly. He goes, "This sounds like Dracula's cousin." So then they
got a lot of dialogue.
As you requested.
It's interesting they added the no sparring part.
No sparring.
Tony gripes at him.
That was a whole new little bit of business too, because in the original it's just like, "Well, you're not going to spar?" He goes, "I don't think I need it anymore." But in this one, apparently he was supposed to have sparring partners and they just never showed up. So that's new, but
it helps round the story out though. It works.
Yeah. And then we've got
Stallone wears a beard well. I'll just say that.
Hey, I'll be honest with you. I have this call out later on, but I was going to say he should have kept that beard for the fight. That would have looked badass.
I agree.
I wish he would have left it.
I agree.
I wish he would have left it.
This is something I actually leaned over and talked to Deke about in the theater. They shot the Russia scenes in Wyoming.
Florida? Wyoming.
But I tell you what, in that scope format on a big screen, it just looked like gigantic. Like it looked like Lawrence of Arabia or something.
Yeah.
It just really, I mean, it looked bigger than it ever had before. And even at home, in that scope format, it just makes it look more epic.
Quick question
know?
for you guys. I have a question for you guys. That's the one thing that I was going to bring up, because I was like, well, I love the aspect ratio. It's cool. I loved it in the theater, but it doesn't match any of the rest of the series. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Not that it's a big deal, but I was just interested in your guys' thoughts on that.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I just watched Raimi's Spider-Man 1 and 2, and those movies are two different aspect ratios.
Interesting.
And it's just, I think once it starts, you kind of go, oh, it's different. And then you just watch the movie.
I just thought it was interesting because not every, but I thought the majority of the cuts that he made to this new cut was to blend the story in with the rest of the series. That wasn't the full driving purpose, but I felt like it was definitely an added bonus. And then he goes and changes the aspect ratio. Again, it was cool to see up in the theater. Like Jared said, I mean, again, I mentioned just the grand, the grandeur of the curtains opening up before the movie started. You just know you're in for a real treat when it just keeps going and going.
When the sound is working.
Yeah.
Aspect ratio.
Yes.
I'm fine with it. They did switch over to scope in the
wait.
Creed movies.
This is a different aspect ratio than the original Rocky 4?
Yeah.
Yes.
Went from, I think, 185 to
185.
239.
Yep.
Oh.
Went from this
I didn't catch that.
to this.
And I think the other Rockies are 185, correct?
They are until you get to Creed, and then they went back to scope.
Copy that.
So the training montage, I didn't pick up any huge differences.
There was one sequence in there where he's got the black jacket and a beanie, but it didn't really make a big difference. I thought the train sequence is pretty much the same, and it holds the same weight.
Yeah, and he did.
I just want to say I really like that song, "Hearts on Fire."
I like the whole soundtrack.
I mean, it's just. I think the Survivor song is kind of lame, but
they just had to bring him back because they did.
I was like, "Can you write us another Eye of the Tiger?" And the answer was no.
I do like, again, Tony Burton. It seems like he has a little extra bit of business here. They do have pretty much the same conversation that they had in the theatrical, but it's always good to see. Like I said, more Tony
Burton's
Burton.
great. He's just great.
He's like Apollo's.
We don't
like
need this
son.
man in our life.
Yeah, the man kept coming after you.
Oh, so good.
But yeah, here's something that Deke mentioned earlier: the Russian scrapbook mirror voiceover. He added dialogue from that earlier scene into this scene as his internal monologue,
which makes more sense. I thought. Did you think it made more sense?
I did. Maybe it's just I'm so familiar with that line from earlier in the movie that it was distracting.
What line is
to
it?
me.
What line is it?
He's got to be willing to die to beat me, which I thought worked better over him.
So he pulled it out of the discussion
Adrian
with
fight
Adrian,
sequence,
and he put it there. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you. I think he should just drop that speech completely. I would have liked to seen him all by himself in an isolated cabin with literally just wind sound effects and just him putting those pictures up. I think that would have really, because they keep talking about he's in this isolated cabin. He doesn't want any other sparring partners. He's all by himself. This is him doing himself. And even Tony Burton, he's like, hey, look, I know you got your own thing you got to do and you got to mentally get prepared, but I'm here for you. But I know you're here by yourself. I think just doing those pictures with just maybe some wind sound effects, it just sounds like an isolated cabin. I think would have worked a little more powerful than that.
Mike, do me a favor and give us an edit cut where we just put that wind sound in, please. Let's get the Mike cut from this, as Mike edits all the horror movies to show to his children and stuff. No, but you're right. I agree with you. I agree. I think he didn't trust the audience enough to go with him. And
there's something that comes up later that I want to talk about too.
But he seems. I just want to add. He seems kind of voiceovering seems to be his thing now. I've
Yes, and
We'll
yeah,
get
and
to
I'm
that.
not, okay.
There's one, yeah,
Yeah, there's one
Get
coming up. There's one that's coming up that's pretty egregious
Yeah,
that we'll talk about.
of course.
But okay, so we got Hearts on Fire. Adrian comes back.
She's back.
All this is pretty much the same. I mean, if there are differences, Deke would probably know what they are, but they're
I'm ready to talk the fight.
Okay.
I'm good.
so. All right.
And a
We
little
got
bit
the
of
fight.
the pre stuff going into it too. There's
Yeah.
some differences there.
Okay. Oh yeah, where they're in the locker room.
Yeah.
Real
Yeah,
quick,
First of all,
I
we
want to
got
go
a
back
Christmas
real
tree,
fast.
guys. We know it's Christmas.
Yeah, yeah, that's Christmas. What are you saying, Mike?
Real quick, the scene between Rocky and Apollo before the fight, was that taken out from the theatrical?
I think
You
it
know?
was.
Because they had that picture of Drago that someone had drawn over his face. So I didn't know if that's scene, or did they use an alternate scene?
He's bowing down and he gets the black and white speech from the beginning of the new cut, which is the Rocky 3 stuff. Is that correct, Jared? Because he's down, he's got his gloves. He
No, I'm
cuts
talking
back.
about Apollo before Apollo's
He's talking
fight
about
with
before
Drago.
Apollo's fight.
Oh, we're going all the way back. I'm so sorry. My fault.
I don't.
No, it's
I think
did they
it's-
cut? Because I don't remember them talking before the fight.
Was that excised?
I think that might have been taken out because I just remember that picture of Drago. Somebody had drawn.
They drew a mustache on it.
Yeah, and I don't remember that being in the.
They might have.
Oh,
not
I-
cut at
yeah,
all.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So anyway, it's not. It doesn't matter. I was just curious. It was a question. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but there is in this new cut. There's new business. Before in the locker room, Tony's applying the Vaseline to his face.
I love that. You know, that really, I don't know if I was reading too much into that. That felt very like coins on the eyes going into the Greek mythology underworld. That's what that felt like. I love just that. I know
Man,
it's the
that's-
stupidest little thing, but I love that just
No.
that grease going over the eyes like that. That did something for me.
I just thought it was something to keep the sweat out of his.
It
eyes.
is, but it just the insert shot of it. It felt like, man.
Well, I
he's
thought
going-
it was cool when Tony handed Rocky the pregnancy test.
Hey, I call it as I see it.
and you did see that.
Yeah, you did. Oh my gosh!
When you watch it on one of these, folks, you got to take it as it comes.
Just
Listen.
like Nolan and Denny Villeneuve wanted it.
that was very powerful.
For those just listening to the podcast, Matt just held up his phone. So
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I like the extra business before the fight, and I'm glad he left in Burt Young's finest piece of acting there when he's like, "If I could unzip myself and step out." I love that scene. I just love it.
It's
And
hey, I got a quick question backing up. The right before we get into anything, even in the locker room, the announcer Barry Thompson says this promises to be the most watched event in boxing history. I got a question for you guys. This movie's been released twice in a theater. It's one of the highest grossing home video movies of all time. Is he lying?
You might have a point. Might have an
I
argument.
mean,
to be made.
seriously. I remember him saying that line. I'm like, well, now that I'm thinking about it, has this been the most viewed?
well, it's very possible.
I have to ask. But anyway, sorry.
But you know the Fathom event screening was their highest grossing Fathom event ever.
Oh,
Wow.
really?
Wow. I didn't know those numbers. That's great.
Yeah, for the Rocky IV thing. So
a drunk
Wow.
William Shatner is probably really upset right now.
yeah, that's okay. But so the fight with Drago is improved in, I think, in every
Well, you
way.
mentioned something with the Apollo fight, and it was something I thought I picked up on this one. So I thought, did they do the same thing with this fight? Where because it looked like they were kind of like trading licks.
Yes.
It didn't look like that.
This is again a real boxing match.
It's not him
Yeah.
just like because I when I watched the theatrical one again, it's almost frustrating to watch how often Rocky gets hit.
Yeah, Rocky's just getting mutilated.
And in the new cut, and like I said, you guys have watched it more than me, so you can be more precise. But it didn't feel like it was that way in this. It didn't feel like it was just Rocky just getting hit in the face until the end.
It,
No.
it feel- again, it feels like a serious boxing match that has back and forth. It's not just one-sided.
Yeah.
Like again, I'm not taking anything away from the theatrical cut. As much as I'm saying how much I love this new cut, I still adore and cherish the theatrical cut. I've been in love with it for 35 years, but it's an over-the-top superhero movie. This is a real boxing match. I mean, you see blows back and forth. I mean, it's obviously one-sided for a while, and that's the hole that Stallone needs to dig himself out of to get to the end. But I mean, this is a real boxing match.
Well,
now.
he comes out. Rocky, I think, gets in the first shots
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
Tony is saying, "Take it to him, take it to him," and
Yeah.
he comes out and he gets some licks in on him pretty quick.
Mhm.
And I think the cut on Drago's face comes much earlier in this new cut. It feels like it does anyway.
I don't know if it comes earlier, but when it happened, it had just as much of a like adrenaline impact for me as it did in the first
There's
movie.
just there is
It's
something
like-
about that
it's
every time
amazing.
you watch it,
It's amazing.
It really is like
And it doesn't matter what cut you're
Whoa.
watching.
It's a perfect
You
moment.
get that punch and you get that sound effect, and it stands
The
and that
music,
carries up
everything,
every single
music
time.
and Dolph
Sting.
Lundgren's face. I mean, he
I
has
know
that
he's
great,
he's like
Mhm.
crap.
It's a
I'm-
perfect. It's
I'm
one of the.
bleeding.
It's a perfect cinema moment when that happens.
I agree, Matt. That is the scene when you watch it as a 10-year-old boy and you watch it at home video and you show it to a girlfriend for the first time. It doesn't matter. That is the moment where Stallone literally has everybody eating out of his hand. That is a quintessential scene in his career. I mean, that's
Yep. I agree.
that one punch is huge. I don't want to like blow it up too much, but literally there's nobody who hasn't watched Rocky 4 for the first time, no matter what cut it is, and just totally been enthralled by, oh my God, he stands a chance. Like, you know,
and
it's-
Tony has that great line where like
You caught him.
He's like
You see?
he's not a machine.
He's a
Yeah.
man. It's great. It's
Yeah.
great. It's all great.
One of the things I want to bring up, sorry to take over for a second, but one of the things that's really great about round one now, there's a sequence in there now where Rocky gets knocked down, but it's more of a trip this time. And it looked like a real,
It
like
is.
a real
It-
outtake.
That's
And
he really
I-
fell.
I love that.
He actually
Again,
says that in the documentary.
oh, I must have missed that. But I love that little cut. That's so much more realistic and so much more like you can tell that he's dazed and all over it. And he feels like a real boxer that's kind of embarrassed versus him getting knocked down, readjusting his mouthpiece, which did nothing for me now that I'm looking back, because this cut is so much better to me. I really like that new trip up where he falls down. I think it's important.
Yeah. And there's just, if you've got any favorite moments in the recut, just call them out, because I mean, just to
Sound
go-
effects are different, which
Yes,
you mentioned earlier.
you know,
but
not-
it sounds like real people getting smacked the hell
Yes.
out of. I love the sound effects.
Yes.
it's
Um,
funny to me how every time I watch, and it's like any Rocky movie, anytime you get to the boxing, you're just in it. You're just in
Yeah.
the movie.
Yeah,
You're
oh,
like,
yeah.
oh my God, Rocky got hit. Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, but
I got a quick question. So going back to the knockout, and this goes for all three of you guys. What did you think of the new voiceover?
Oh, I noticed that. I
okay.
noticed it.
And
Oh, wait,
Bothered-
no. There was in a dialogue exchange. I think it was between him and Tony that I felt they used the original footage from when they shot. It wasn't looped, and it kind of stood out to me a little bit. I could be wrong, but it really
Well-
felt like on set dialogue.
you mean it was recorded on a boom mic?
Yeah. That's
Well, I think what Deke's talking about
no, I know what you're talking about now.
is, this sounds to me like 2021 Stallone
Yeah,
actually
I thought
looped.
so.
He recorded something
Mhm.
and put it in
Absolutely.
there.
And
Yes.
I got to tell you, it didn't really work for me the first time because I'm not a huge voiceover guy. The more times I watched it,
Unless it's in Dune.
you
You know how to put all the still suit.
Uh,
He
but
puts boxing
I have
gloves
to
like
tell
him.
you, the voiceover works for me now. I mean, he's sitting there and he's doing what any other boxer that's just had, has just been knocked unconscious like that. I mean, he's sitting there, he's trying to calm himself down, and he's doing just what methodically what he needs to do, calming himself down. Breathe. You got to get back up. You can't do anything else unless you just get back up. That's all he's saying. And the voiceover actually works for me this time.
Well, he's only used it. He used it in Rocky Balboa.
When
When
the
he's-
first time I think he used
Yeah,
it.
that's kind of where he brought that out.
Yeah, but sorry to go off on a little tangent. He did, there's the Rambo 4, he was doing some voiceover stuff where I was like, oh man, Stallone's kind of in a rut where he's doing a lot of voiceover these days. Sorry to go off on a little small thing, but so I was a little concerned when I saw this new cut. I was like, man, he's the voiceover guy now. But the more I've watched it, it actually works for me. It really does. He's calming himself down.
If you're a kid and you're watching this movie for the first time and you're like a younger kid being introduced to the Rocky movies, I think it's going to work perfectly. But I think to Jared's point, I hear a 21-year-old old Rocky, old Sylvester Stallone's voice in that video.
And I think that's what is, again, the jarring thing that kind of pulled me out of it.
It's not the same Rocky you're listening to in the movie. It's he's trying his best, but his age is coming through that voice. But that said, if I was watching this as a kid for the first time, I probably wouldn't even think twice about it. So, but it did take me out of it because it's such a different departure from the theatrical.
Everything's going to take you out the first time.
That one specifically jarred me out.
Try it for a second viewing, see how it lands on you. I think it grows on you. I was going to bring up the there's a new scene where Drago's that for me did not work. I know we've talked a lot about how Drago is a lot more humanized in this cut, but there's a couple things for me that did not work, and one of them was him crying about his eye. That for me didn't work. I didn't really care for that line.
I don't really remember that.
He said, "How's my eye? What's my eye?"
He's like really whiny about it too. It didn't really work.
I gotta watch again. I don't know because
I don't remember that.
It might be the first time he was ever injured as a boxer.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, he's only had a couple matches, and like all of a sudden he's got his eye, blasted open. So I gotta watch it again. It didn't take me out.
Seeing him whine about it just kind of really set me back a little bit. That's just me.
Like punching iron.
Well, how about since we're talking about Drago, why don't we get right to the end after he loses? I thought spectacular stuff with Drago. Even though he was.
After the match. Oh, can I back up one thing?
I'm so sorry. We've moved on.
This is how it works on this podcast. Hey, I did want to bring up right before they go into the last round, which now again in this new cut is so important. It's got a lot more gravity going into the last round. But there's a scene in there that I thought was very important where the ref comes over and says, "Hey man, you look hurt. I'm about to stop the fight."
Oh, and
Rocky
he's hurt too.
Yeah, well, Rocky says, "And out of breath." And he says, "I didn't come all the way here to stop this fight sitting down." And that's an important line to me. And that was a huge addition for me. That was very important.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And then Duke is like, "Well, he's hurt too."
Yeah, I love it. Great line. It's a great line. Yeah, and it really, because that's the thing. Going into the last round, and this goes back to, again, I wasn't a huge fan of the scrapbooking voiceover, but when you realize that Drago and Rocky are going into the last round, absolutely at the same level. They start off where Drago is 7 feet tall and Rocky is what he is. And he's got this huge, uphill climb to go through for the first 14 boxing rounds. Sorry. But in the last round, they're at the same level. They're both completely out of it. And it goes back to that speech. He's going to have to be willing to die to beat me. And that's why he wins. And that's maybe why that voiceover works a little bit. But that interchange where he's like, I did not come here to step out of this ring sitting down. That was a really important line to me. So I just wanted to back up for that.
Yeah.
Sorry about
and also that kind of reinforces what I was saying. When you watch the theatrical, the montage is primarily Rocky getting clobbered. In the theatrical
that's
version.
true. It is.
So
and in the new cut, it's not.
So Deke, being hyper familiar with the theatrical cut,
hyperspace familiar with it.
It made me feel like when I was watching this, did they downplay the crowd chanting Rocky in this cut? Because it seemed like they had it. It was there. It didn't seem so overwhelming though.
I think I got that sense too.
Yeah, that's a good call. I you know what? I'll probably pay attention to that the next time. I think there was just so much more. Here's the one thing I will say: there's so many other things now distracting me that I'm paying attention to now in this new cut that I'm not really worrying about because I'm already familiar with the fact that he's winning over the crowd. I will say some of his speech towards the end resonates a lot more as far as winning over the crowd and stuff like that. So I know we're getting ready to talk about that right now, but I would say there's so many other things that are not distracting me, but I'm really focused on a lot of different things now watching this new cut that the swaying of the crowd wasn't as important to me.
Well,
so maybe it was a little undertone to me.
I did notice that Gorbachev did not applaud him.
That's right.
That's a big difference.
He just got up and walked out.
I thought that was a great choice to take that part out. I thought it was great.
So
that slow cat clap has become so iconic.
No, wait. Now they had in the original theatrical cut though, you could see there was Gorbachev with like the wine stain, right?
No, he never had
There's
a
no
wine.
I
wine
thought they had
So,
that.
so you know what you're getting confused on? And it's a true story. That same actor, after he did that in Rocky IV, they loved how much
Naked
he
Gun?
looked like him. Naked Gun, and he got the port wine
Oh.
stain.
No, did
yeah,
they really? Oh,
same
man.
actor, same actor.
Dovetailing
story.
together on that. man.
Wow, that's funny.
That's
So
awesome.
clearly that was supposed to be Gorbachev. Even
Yes,
without
That's the
and
one that-
Naked Gun it was.
The one that Frank Drebin rubbed off.
Yes.
I knew it.
Same guy. Same guy.
That's
So-
funny. Yeah, there you go.
So when Rocky when Rocky does the speech at the end,
Well, hold on. Before we get to that, the
boy.
Drago, when he goes to Drago before he's leaving the ring.
yeah, but
That was
speech,
before.
the speech comes first.
Was it for? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
he's
got-
leaving the ring. He's not leaving and then coming back in and giving.
for
a
some reason, I
speech.
thought. Yeah. Okay.
He had to run in the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, he's like, hang on a second.
Yo, Adrian, I
right.
should have drank all that water.
All right. I'm sorry. Go on.
So the speech, it's obviously there's no mention of the kid, and it's a little more understated. And when he wins the match, there's some really for real Bill Conti music that kicks in. It's not the Vince DiCola version from theatrical. It's Bill Conti, so his speech is it's a little more. He seems a little more understated, probably because he's exhausted. He's had the crap kicked out of him, and but it's much more quiet, I guess. It's not quite as the theatrical. He's like he's slurring and he's.
But he adds that line when he references, my best friend said to me once, you can't
Yes.
change. And then here's the thing. I love this line if it's read on the script. He needed to take, and I know he only had certain cuts to work with, but he needed just one more pause or maybe like a tear or something, because he goes, my best friend once said, you can't change. Then he died. And I'm like, wait, take a breath, bro. Like I need like a comma or a pause or some kind of like grab your heart for a second and then say, and then he died or something, or tear up a bit. But the fact that he went right into that line, I needed a spacer there. That didn't work.
Yeah.
Again, if I was to read it on script, I'm like, man, this is a great line. There's a comma here though, that was not read in the take that they used. Just putting that out there.
But so he he says his speech, and then what Matt's talking about here, there's when he's leaving the ring, it's a great little moment where
there's a lot of great moments in the going out of the ring. I love that whole sequence.
And he brings Adrian in, like Adrian like
Man.
gets inside the ring with him, and
Mhm.
I think there's a few good shots of Tony Burton too. Like Tony Burton's getting very emotional.
Well, that's the thing. And sorry, I should have brought this up when you were talking about the speech, but if you want, I'm not saying Stallone is a struggling actor, but if he ever wanted any kind of help with his acting ability, the best thing he can do is put Tony Burton right in the same frame as him as he's delivering probably his most iconic speech, because just to see all the emotion and the tearing up and the
he does
blood,
that
sweat,
really well.
dude, he kills just his background acting.
Yeah,
I need
like-
more Tony Burton in any one of my cuts going forward, please and thank you. But he sells that speech so much more just having him in the frame. He's important to that frame.
Yeah, you're exactly right. He's
I know I am, because if you watch that sequence, he's the best part of it, and he's in the background.
Reactive, very reactive.
Yeah, he's the best.
But and then we got touch and gloves as we leave the ring,
that's
which
important.
is not, that wasn't even hinted at in the theatrical.
I love that moment. I thought it was great.
That's right.
Yeah, it was.
I love seeing him coming out of the ring. You know, just again, this goes back to Stallone talking about wanting to let this new cut breathe. He was just, when he cut this in '85, it was just so important to him that he's really studying music videos, and MTV keeps bringing this up in documentaries and interviews. He keeps talking about how he just wanted a fast cut, but letting us, as we have lived this journey with Rocky, at least get out of the ring with him and see all the congratulating and the sportsmanship and touching gloves and, man, all that stuff. That was so important to me. And adding the Eye of the Tiger and bookending it with what we saw in the beginning of the movie, and knowing that Eye of the Tiger now represents Apollo in his head, I thought that was a really nice just I wasn't really sure about the new cut, seeing it in the theater with you, Jared, but I got to tell you that going out to credits like that, I was like, well, that was the best way to end that. Like, I'm in a super good mood right now. And it's only gotten better every time I've watched it.
I'll tell you, I'm still not sold on Eye of the Tiger at the end of this movie.
Oh man.
It kind of put me
working for me.
It didn't really work for me, but I got to watch it again.
Eye of the Tiger to me is a baked in Rocky 3 thing.
Copy.
If for me, I mean, that's the way it feels to me. Because
I agree. I agree.
And
with that
and I think Mark even kind of leaned over to me and said, "That's an odd choice." Like,
it's grown on me for
just to hear the and it's like,
man.
So what I think the best part about this movie, whether this becomes like what you said, Deke, if this is my preferred cut or not over the theatrical cut, the best part about this movie is I feel like it's a good completer to the series in terms of like it really opens up the Apollo Rocky relationship more than it was. You get a lot more to we're saying a lot more real boxing, a lot more real sportsmanship. It puts great connective tissue to Creed 2, which is not my favorite movie, but the Drago component of that movie I really enjoyed. And the Drago, him and his son together, I thought was a great part. Connecting that together through this kind of stuff worked really well. So I think this is a great completer for the set, for the whole movie, for me to get a full rounded picture of Rocky. Much more so, after seeing this now than just having the theatrical cut. I think even though the theatrical cut was great, as we said in our podcast before, it really went off the Hollywood high dive. And, he really capitalized on his fame at the time. But, to Deke's point, coming back now from a much mature, older, a lot more wisdom, a lot more experience, telling from that story and recutting it through that lens, I think got us something pretty special. And, it's a unique thing as we were saying, it's an amazing thing that we have this movie to begin with, but the fact that Stallone took time to piece this together, and, it's obviously a passion project that he felt strongly about. And I could see why, especially now, especially if you love the later movies and the spinoffs and where the Rocky character is gone, I think this is a must see to kind of like fill in the small gaps of that picture for Rocky.
Mike, what are your final thoughts on the cut at this moment?
Well, I thought after I watched it, I was kind of surprised at I liked it. I mean, I watched it and I liked it. And then I'm really glad I didn't watch the theatrical first. And then it was a movie I just kind of thought about, just kind of like thought about it while I was driving to work. I, think about stuff. And I can't really say if this is my preferred cut yet or not, but I do think it might be, because I feel like it's like the way I would describe, and I think we talked about this, the way I would describe Rocky 4 is that it has 1 foot on the ground, 1 foot on tippy toes. It's kind of in fantasy land a little bit. And I feel like this one has both feet almost planted firmly on the ground, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's still a little like that music video. I'm really surprised that he left that in there, because it really doesn't fit in this new version. And having said that, it's not Jedi rocks. So but I liked it. I thought it was good. I think Stallone was a superstar when he made 4. I think there's maybe some of the decisions were made from his ego. I think this time around he was looking at it at a more unbiased perspective. He was more concerned about the story than anything else, and I think you can see that. So I think it's good. I think it's funny. It's different. I think I like it because it just feels more real.
Yeah, I think you're right. Deke, I'll let you have the last word on it. But for me, I haven't lived with it long enough. For me, we mentioned the Donner cut earlier. I think the Donner cut is an interesting experiment but I and it's superior to the Richard Lester cut in many respects, but the Richard Lester cut is what I grew up with, and it's what I like the most.
Plus, the Donner cut's incomplete. It's just
it's a Frankenstein hodgepodge of things. This movie is not that. As we've talked about, the technical aspects of getting this thing made is amazing, but I still feel the first, maybe the first third, I have serious issues with how it's paced. I think it's too. I think it goes too fast to get to Apollo's death. But like I said, I've only seen it twice, and I've been watching the other one since 1985. So it's these things that are holding me back from saying unequivocally this is my preferred version. I think my preferred cut at this time is still the theatrical, although I appreciate so much. For me, the perfect version of this movie would be keeping some of the things I loved from the theatrical version and melding it a little, because Stallone, he chopped. Like, he added 40 minutes, but he lost 40 minutes. And when I heard 40 minutes, I thought, well, heck, we're getting a 2 hour and 15-minute movie, but it was a 90-minute movie still. But so there's a lot of things he left out of the theatrical or the director's cut that it's just stuff I'm used to, and it's stuff I wanted to see. And but you know, I'll get there. I don't dislike this at all. And I'm looking forward to watching it a few more times. But so for me, theatrical still gets top marks, but I really enjoy, and this conversation has added to my appreciation of it. I will say that. So, Deke, final thoughts?
You guys are too kind for letting me go last on your own podcast. You guys,
well, you got 90 seconds.
Copy that. All right, start the timer now. No, there's just a couple of things I wanted to bring up. You know, one of the things I really want to give Stallone credit for is the fact that he is one of the few real movie stars. You know, I got to give the guy a huge compliment. I don't know anyone who stayed as relevant for as many decades as this gentleman has. And the fact that he can still, you know, start off his career with like 2 legendary iconic roles and then still stay consistently, you know, pretty much in the news, whether he's doing Suicide Squad, you know, sequels, or if he's doing recutting of some of his classic films. I really appreciate the fact that he's been able to stay as relevant and stay at the true definition of movie star for as many decades as he has. And the one thing I will say about this new cut, it has grown on me. One of the things I thought was so surprising, when I'm so familiar with the original cut of Rocky IV, but like I brought up a couple of times in this podcast, it's a very over the top. I just promoted one of his other films, but it's a very almost like comedically like over the top superhero movie. I mean, you know, the David and Goliath thing was really built upon in the theatrical cut, and it's very MTV-ish. This new cut, really, for me, I remember when I saw the first Creed movie, I remember thinking, well, about half an hour, well, maybe even like 15 minutes into it, there's a scene where young Adonis is in jail, and I remember thinking, well, this is like a really serious tone. Like, this is like the fact that this is the movie that's so serious that that really couldn't exist without Rocky IV. It's cemented in the legend of Rocky IV. And I remember thinking the tone was a complete switch. Now I credit that all to Ryan Coogler, but watching this new cut, I remember thinking, oh, he's doing what they did with Creed. They're taking this as a serious tone now. This matches for me Rocky I better. This matches Balboa better. So I really appreciate this cut. I will say, the more times you watch it, the better it gets. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is I don't not love the theatrical cut. I could watch the theatrical cut if I'm over at a friend's house, but I'll be honest with you, if it's me, from now on, I'm totally in love with this new cut for a lot of reasons. It's not perfect. But I would say with what he had to work with, I think it's an absolutely fantastic cut. And the last thing I will say is hashtag release the poly cut. So that's all I'm going to say.
Poly cut. Oh, well, this has been a great conversation. Let's hope on the next episode of Babbling with Balboa, we're getting Mr. Stallone on to talk to us, because that would be We'll invite you back for that, Deke, if that ever happens.
Copy that.
So,
Please.
but we're going to wrap it up. We're going to close the book on Babbling with Balboa until we need to reopen the gym again.
The prequel TV series
or whatever he's going to
Or if he
do.
re-edits another one of his movies.
He's been hashtagging Rocky 7 on Instagram lately. I don't know what that's about.
No.
Look, but you know what? Every time we say like, "Oh God, is he doing Rocky
Now,
6?"
I'm going to say
What?
this: do not touch Rocky.
No. Just leave Rocky alone.
Rocky
Don't
5
forget
would
it.
be a good
as well.
project.
Yeah,
Go for
hey,
Rocky,
Rocky 5. Can he salvage
Polish
that?
that turd up a little, make it shiny. See what he can
Let's
do.
see. But anyway, we want to direct people over to Deke's podcast, the SideTrack'd podcast. It's a great movie podcast. Deke somehow scores celebrities to actually come on his podcast. He won't tell us how he does it, but he does it. He just released a RoboCop podcast recently, which I was fortunate enough to be on, and it was a lot of fun talking about RoboCop. He talks to Ronnie Cox on that podcast.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, Dick Jones. He got Dick Jones on his podcast. So
I got the dueling banjos man himself.
that's true.
Only a glitch.
Yeah.
So we want to direct you over there and
Hey,
give.
sorry if I can jump in, and this is
Oh,
totally
geez. What the
huge
heck?
egotistically of me. I got to
Okay,
say,
you got 30 seconds.
I wanted to say thank you to Jared, by the way. You killed it on the RoboCop episode, which dropped today, by the way. And my next episode that's coming out, I'm interviewing Garrett Brown, who was the inventor of the Steadicam, who was the gentleman who ran up the stairs with Rocky, which is the first Steadicam shot that the entire world ever saw up on the silver screen. So it's going to be huge. We talk a lot about working with Stallone. He's got some great funny stories about Stallone working with Kubrick. So look out for that episode. But I just wanted to tie that in because he does a lot of amazing conversations about working with Stallone and Avildsen and his, being first on the block to actually add a fluid motion camera to cinema. It's a big interview. It's pretty awesome. I'm excited.
That's awesome. I think next week we're going to talk about what we had for dinner, so you won't want to miss that. No. So look, if you love Babbling with Balboa, go check out Deke's show because that is going to be a great episode. So we're going to call it a night here, gang, but thank you for watching. We'll be back next week on the Hyperspace every Monday. So keep it locked in here, and we'll see you next time.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to The Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us here next time as we take you into the 25th century.